Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show, our next guest, Nasrin, was evicted from her own property. This was due to a management company issuing charges which she disputed.
The lady called for assistance from the police and she's now been arrested, handcuffed, took out of her own home.
The student loans, the debt book has been sold. All of what we've talked about is coming your way.
Sergeant?
Have a seat. Don't actually necessarily go into a police station at this time.
What has she been arrested for?
Well, that video was very shocking because Nasrin was actually peacefully occupying her own property and she was arrested for breach of the peace in her own house.
It's very painful to watch because in that instance I realised something terrible is happening in this country.
On a previous episode of Windows on the World, we featured a show which was about forced evictions. We're talking to one of those people who was unlawfully evicted from her property and what's happened since that show. So Nasrin, welcome back to Windows on the World.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
So can you give us a bit of an update about what's happened?
Well, in 2013, as you know, I was evicted unlawfully, illegally. They had no paperwork whatsoever to substantiate anything. And please remember, it's a civil matter, but the police are trespassing into these civil matters. That happened in 2013. And I have been back into the property since, but I haven't been arrested. No one's come to take me away like they did on the first day of on the first eviction in 2013. And I've also willingly gone to the police station and asked questions about my unlawful arrest and explained that I have been back into the property and why am I not being arrested? And if they have any grounds to do so, then here I am, because at this point, the fear is gone. And it's a case of now establishing facts and putting that to them. So what's been happening is I've exhausted the court procedure because it's all set up to fall against you anyway. So that's exhausted. Where I am right now is I have been contacting certain members of the police just to get some clarity on information that I am, as a work in progress, learning in terms of what paperwork should have been shown to me on the day, i.e. the warrant, and previous to that, the CPR rules that govern all the necessary procedures, protocols, paperwork that should be in place at the court, so my rights aren't being tampered with. But as we know, none of that happens, and I've just been asking pertinent questions with the new understanding that I have that wasn't available to me on the day I was evicted. So that's where I am. I've had some very interesting, to say the least, responses from police.
Are these responses, sorry Nasrin, are these responses in writing that you can tell us about?
Yes, I've had correspondence, I've had an investigation, and they don't seem to want to answer the questions that I can now comfortably put to them based on my research of the law. So what you're finding that when you put a fact to them, they respond with an opinion because they're desperately trying to protect their own. So in a recent correspondence, I've been told now that when I was asking for the warrant, I'm now being told that a warrant isn't crucial.
Well, this is very interesting, Nasrin, because those police officers who arrested you for breach of the peace in your own property, which was entirely incorrect thing to do, and procedurally wrong, were doing that on the assumption that you were an unlawful tenant in that property due to a warrant for the repossession of that property. Now, you found out a lot about this, and it was exposed in that show, but for the sake of viewers who don't know about this, what kind of questions were you asking the police?
Well, I was asking them what authority are they standing under when they're trespassing on a civil matter, because they're constables and they are not legally trained. That's not their job. So how is it that they are, and the video footage demonstrates this perfectly, the sergeants acted on paperwork that at the side of the road they are determining as being in order. How on earth can they determine that when they're not legally qualified? And it's a civil matter. So when you put these questions to them, you don't get a straight answer because they know you've asked them a pertinent question, and therefore everything that they write to you is opinions. Notably, they said that they'd acted on paperwork. That is in the documents that have been sent to me when they did an investigation. So they have concluded for me, when I asked about a warrant, they told me that the notice of eviction and the EX96 is the warrant. Well, later in my findings, I have come to learn that the warrant is a completely separate document. So I've now asked them and explained, whilst I've been asking them, trying to educate them, can you locate the warrant? And they can't. And so in this correspondence now, because they can't produce it, they are now telling me the warrant isn't crucial because the sergeant in question was correct in arresting me to prevent a breach of the peace, which is an impossibility because I was locked behind my door when they arrived. And no one in the vicinity of my property, be it the actual two supposed bailiffs, all my neighbours reported any breach of the peace by myself to them or asked them to come out to to stop me in a breach of the peace.
Yes, they've defeated their own argument, really. They've defeated their own argument simply because they had to be acting on a warrant. That was the jurisdiction that they had to repossess the property, and now they're saying that the warrant was not necessary and not necessarily part of the procedure because you were actually causing a breach of the peace, which you weren't. So the whole thing is complete nonsense.
Well, there are two sentences. One sentence is in the same paragraph following each other. It says that they don't think the existence of a warrant is crucial, but notably what they've written straight after in the same paragraph is, this is because even if the warrant is invalid, the police sergeant was still acting to prevent a breach of the peace. And yet I was the one who called the police. They were only there by virtue of my authority, which I could have revoked at any time. This is something I've learned since. Their original authority is constable, so they must remain impartial at all times. The only individual in the constabulary that doesn't hold title of constable, I believe, is the chief commissioner. Any other rank in the constabulary is constable. And one particular sergeant of the two that came and was involved in arresting me says on tape, he's not a constable, he's a sergeant. Well, he obviously doesn't understand who he is.
Well, that's it. That's very interesting. That's very interesting because a sergeant is a rank and a constable is a role.
Yes, but the original authority that they operate from, and it's in their own manuals, is constable. So they must remain impartial. But clearly, on the footage, you can see, even a child can see, that they were there on a mission, irrespective of anything that we were going to say. They were there to support the bailiff, and they've actually demonstrated that in writing to me, that they were there to do their duty, to assist the bailiff. Well, I called the police, and the police never came to assist me. They converted their duty to me to some kind of erroneous duty to the bailiff.
Well, what's interesting, Nazrin, is that in actual fact, they were there to prevent a breach of the peace, ironically.
Yes, yes. But even that is erroneous, because the police aren't hanging around they're not on the beat. They're not round street corners having a cigarette waiting to be called. The reason why these two sergeants come to find themselves on private land, because it is private land and private property, is because I called them.
That
That's
is
why they were there.
that is the most important point
Yes.
in the whole thing, I think, is that you called the police because there was a potential breach of the peace. There was an attempt to repossess your property without a correct warrant, and the police assisted the bailiffs in that incorrect assumption. And it was an assumption because we've found that out since, and you've been into this in quite some detail. So,
Yes, and sorry, go ahead.
that's fine. I just wanted to clear that up because that's a very, very important point in this case. But
That's right. And when you gain knowledge of the law and what the police codes and conduct is in their own manuals, you can see the bigger picture. You can start asking pertinent, relevant questions, because now your questions are based on facts. And there is much case law to support every fact that I put their way. Now, just to go back to, just to go back to the point that when I call the police, I'm behind my locked door. These two supposed bailiffs who came to my door, when you watch the video, you can clearly see that they have accessed the communal door with a key.
that is a very interesting point. So it brings us on to what we were talking about the last few days, in that this, well, I'm going to say it's theft of property, which it is, because you held the equity in that property.
Yes,
And
there's no mortgage.
that's right.
There never was.
That's right. What we found out was that there are groups of limited liability partnership solicitors working with private bailiff companies, with police and private investigators and surveillance companies, all rolled into one, assisting each other in what I would, in my opinion, call the theft of property.
That's right. Yes, yes, yes. They're all working together. This is why their machinery works, because there are organizations. One will be the solicitor that brings the claim. One will be the supposed High Court enforcement officer claiming to be a county court bailiff with some kind of authority. So they steal your property, and then they have the companies that come and empty the property, and then you have the estate agent. So they have this racketeering going on where all bases are covered by different arms connected to a body which forms their circle of deceit.
Well, it's very interesting, Nazrin, because what you did with your case, I think, is extremely important, because you uncovered a network of conspiratorial interests who are basically creating debt or liens on property, and then they are instigating that process and using private so-called bailiff companies or civil enforcement High Court enforcement officers to repossess the property without proper county court paperwork.
Absolutely. Excuse me. And I've also been told, on record that one of the courts that I rang and recorded a conversation, the lady told me that the warrant doesn't go through any judge. It just gets, it just gets generated in the admin office.
Exactly, and you found out that there was a company that had
That's right.
that had court paperwork on its website, and that company is linked into surveillance companies and private investigators and high court enforcement officers without naming that company at the moment. Can you just tell us about when you found that out and how you found that out?
Me and my friends were doing some research, and one particular friend of mine is very good at digging and finding information, very persistent. And this individual located this site, which we're not going to name, obviously, and on that site, you can find every single document relating to claims that you can make at the court, everything to do with, if you were bringing a case such as ours, to do with possession of property, all the paperwork, all the procedures and the documents that you need are on this website. Interestingly, what's on this website, which you would think you would be able to find on the Ministry of Justice website, are the warrants, the N49s, the N50s, and such like. That is a question in itself. How has this private entity got these documents that you cannot find at the Ministry of Justice? One of those documents is a warrant, which can be downloaded, and we've done it. Me and my colleagues, we've accessed the site and got these documents, and all you do is fill them in handwriting and pretend it's come from a court, because the thing I'd like people to understand is when you print off this document, the logo that says the county court is already on the document when you print it off. And then you can fill in the rest with bogus names of bailiffs, etc., and go to someone's property and say, I've got a document from the county court. And we've seen this. We've seen these documents being used. We've got evidence of that. Interestingly now, because they know the cat's out of the bag, this site, it has the documents, but it has the word specimen written across it, so nobody can now print them off. Now, is that a coincidence, or is that because, well, I'll leave that open to everyone who's listening. Why suddenly those documents have got the word specimen written across them, whereas just a few weeks before, we were able to print them off. Now, there's lots of videos on YouTube of illegal evictions, and it has been mentioned by notable people that this website has been mentioned, where prominent people now, to do with evictions, who are fighting their cases, are mentioning these documents and tying it to this particular website. So we've discovered all of that. If you put that together with all the other private corporations working together to steal and launder the money, sell the property, sell it through an estate agent, private auctions, and you come back to the fact that when I rang the court and said, how and where is the warrant generated, the woman told me it's done in the admin office and there is no judge involved. So these private bailiff companies have got access, I believe, to the computers in the court, and all this skullduggery is done in the admin office. And these clerks are all, they're all, some of them, I will say, some of the prominent clerks are all part and parcel of the fraud. But the cat is out of the bag, and we can piece it all together. And this is what they find troubling, i.e. the police. Now we can ask pertinent, relevant, targeted questions. They find it desperately hard to answer, so they will give you an opinion, and hopefully you will go away and be satisfied. But obviously we can't do that because our properties have been stolen, our livelihoods have been stolen, and this is a work in progress to getting our properties back and getting answers. Now, I haven't gone to the police to get my property back. I've just used their own arguments against them to get clarity. And in the process, if I get some answers, that's a bonus. And now they're telling me a warrant isn't crucial. Well, I've made my own decision as to the relevance of what they're now saying. And they're also saying that if the warrant was invalid, in my case, there was no warrant. Inadvertently, that is what I am being told. If you read the subtext, there is no warrant. So now they're desperately trying to find a way to protect the sergeant who arrested me.
That's very true, Nazarene. That's very true. That's very true, because I've seen that documentation that was sent to you, and it's totally contradictory. But what we're finding is that all of these public bodies, because they're trained to give these answers and make it look as though it's your opinion. This is a very interesting one. They always say, I'm sorry that you feel that. Well, when you're talking about the law, it's got nothing to do with the way you feel about something.
Absolutely.
And this is where they're coming unstuck. But this letter that you got the other day really confirms everything that you suspected in the first place. So what can we do from here?
Well, I'm going to be responding to this letter in due course, and I'm going to see what the response is, because initially when I went to see this individual at the police, they said, and they agreed with me, that they are not legally qualified. So I was going to give them an opportunity to send it to their legal department, and I'm still going to ask them to do that, because that was their agreement with me.
Yes, that's very interesting. That's very, very interesting, because...
Yeah. And I have that recorded with their full knowledge. They agreed to me recording it, and I had a witness with me. So I would like them, this individual, to stop giving me opinions, but do what he agreed with me at the time that we met. And that's what I'm going to hold this individual to.
Now, as I said, that's very, very interesting. And what people will probably be asking when they hear this is, why are the government allowing this to happen? In other words, why are they letting land pirates steal property, and why are the police assisting with that? And why is this not being brought up in Parliament? Why do people seem ignorant of it? And why is it happening on such a large scale and going completely and utterly unreported? Because none of the mainstream media channels will touch this and give proper information. We know that the BBC... Sorry, go on.
Something quite interesting came up in terms of an act. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it. It got royal assent on it was either the 12th or the 13th of February of this year, and it's called the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015. Section 26, corrupt or other improper exercise of police powers and privileges. And I would urge people to keep this document, print this document off the internet and keep it with them at all times.
Yes, because what this does is it ties them to their duty as a constable.
There you go. Which is their original authority, regardless of their rank. Do not let them tell you otherwise. They are a constable, because interestingly, on the footage, one of the sergeants mentions that he showed me his warrant card. Now, from what I understand, in all the eviction videos, you see the public who go there to support the householder. They say to the police, "Are you on your oath?" And they say, "Here is your oath." Or someone will proceed to read it out to the police constable, because that's what they are. What we should be doing is, it's a little known fact, and I only learned this recently, is we should be asking them for their warrant card. Their warrant card, as I understand it, is proof that they swore an oath. And when this individual sergeant in my footage mentions the warrant, I found that very interesting. I found that very interesting, because he didn't show me his warrant, but if you look at the video in its full context, you will understand the absurdity of what he's saying and when he's saying it, because they never came to see me of their own volition upstairs to show me their warrant card. It's an impossibility, because they only just arrived on the scene. But strangely and unfortunately, the two individuals who assisted me that day didn't pick that up. Well, when the sergeant was saying that they'd already been to see me upstairs and shown me their warrant card. I was behind a locked door. How could they possibly have done that?
It goes back to what we originally noticed about that video, was that the police were acting with the police. So the police were acting with the bailiffs and somebody else. And that's quite an interesting one. If you could go into that, how this works, how this operation works. There are several interested parties in attendance. Can you just go into that for us a while?
Well, even though I called the police that day, when you watch the footage, when you break it down, the police arrived on the scene. I called them. They didn't come to see me, despite what one of the sergeants is saying. So that takes care of that, because he's saying something that was an impossibility. They stayed, they came and they parked quite some way from the flat in question. And the alleged County Court bailiff went over to meet with the sergeant. And they were with that, he was with the sergeant, or should I say two sergeants were with the alleged County Court bailiff for a considerable amount of time. But I called the police. That's where they concocted a plan and they followed it through. It was done on site.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting because...
Because when you see the body language and you listen very carefully to what the first sergeant says, he's given it away. He gives it away. If you listen very carefully. I've watched this footage many times. As my learning has progressed, I've learned to listen and watch, and it's all revealed to you.
Yes, okay, so we haven't got the full video to put up for this week's show, so can you just go over that footage? Because I have seen it, I saw it at the time when we did that first show, and there's an edited version gone up of what the police did, and you ended up handcuffed in the back of a van. So can you just give us the description of what happened before?
You mean before the police arrived?
Yes, just take us through the whole process.
Okay. Now, there were two. I was inside my property. I knew I was going to get some kind of visit from someone, But I was locked safely away behind my door inside my property. It's about 8:45 in the morning, and my buzzer goes downstairs, the intercom, which is the intercom into my flat, and I hear someone say that they're here for the eviction. The next thing I know is, before I can even ask, who are you, identify yourself to me, the next thing I know is I can hear heavy footsteps coming up into the, so someone's come into the communal building, and my flat is on the first floor, and I can hear footsteps, heavy footsteps, running up the stairs to the flat. Then I hear a bang, bang, bang on my door. The individual that spoke said, didn't reveal who they were, a name, where they'd come from. They simply said, we're here to evict anyone in the property. I asked, who are you? I'm not going to open the door. Tell me in a loud voice, who are you? I had a denial of implied right of access notice across the middle of my door, and I could hear them trying to peel it off as I was trying to ask my questions. Long story short, they didn't want to answer my questions, and I told them to leave. Apologies, I did say to them, how did you get into the building? Because I didn't lead you in, but now I know they had a key. Okay, so they leave, but before they leave, I can hear them saying, and this is what's crucial, they say, we can't, amongst themselves, they say, I hear two voices saying to each other, we need to call the police. Until we call the police, we won't be able to do anything. As I heard that, I informed them that I'm now calling my friends to come and assist me and record who you are, because I'm inside my flat, and I'm calling the police. So I proceeded to call my friends who arrived. I still haven't left my flat. These two individuals are now downstairs, outside, and my two colleagues arrive. And in the meantime, the police is being called. So what you see is my two colleagues arriving on scene. Now, my two colleagues, bless them, in their rush to come and support me, they do not ask a valid question, which is, who are you and who are you? Show us your identities. They don't do that. But it's a learning curve. It's a work in progress, you know. You can correct yourself as you learn. And, you know, we're men and women, we make errors. So I'm not going to fault them on that. So that's the first question that must be asked. Who are you? Identify yourselves. They didn't do that. These two individuals, very vague, very ambiguous information. One of them is saying that he is a coordinator. He is here on behalf of the solicitors, and he names them, and he's there to coordinate the locksmith, the bailiff, and the police. And my colleague is asking him, the individual who's filming, but who are you? Who are you? I've later found out that he's actually from a private bailiff company. I found that out when the police did their investigation. So this individual was desperately trying to hide his true identity. The other one, again, it's all vague, is the supposed bailiff that his colleague refers to. He's the bailiff. He's got the paperwork. All this paperwork is gobbledygook. It's over my head. Ask him. He's the bailiff. So this interaction is going on, and you can see that the police van has arrived. So the alleged court bailiff moves towards the police, and my two colleagues are talking to the individual who says he's there as a coordinator. That individual that claims to be a county court bailiff is now discussing something away from us with the police. The police, I would have expected to have parked near the property, jumped out and come to my assistance. That isn't what happened. They had a private meeting with the alleged county court bailiff. Then what you proceed happening is the two sergeants with the alleged county court bailiff move towards the property, and they are met with one of the representatives, one of my colleagues, and my colleague starts asking questions to the sergeant. That the paperwork, you need to look at it. There's no signatures. There's no court stamp. No, there's no mention of a warrant now. No one's talking about a warrant. I didn't know they needed a warrant. Neither did my colleagues. Not the police. Not the two men in question. No one is saying we have a warrant to take the property. That is a crucial fact to note. No one's mentioned that they have a warrant. They're saying they've got documents. The police then, you can see and hear what they say. The police is saying that they are now in the van predetermined what they're going to do. And at that point, nothing matters. They then proceed to the door. Now, this individual that says he's a coordinator, not the one who's the alleged county court bailiff, has a key to the communal door, which is considered private property. It's a private door to a private dwelling, and this individual has a key. And the police sergeant is saying to my colleague, I've seen the paperwork, and I think it is all in order. You are not coming into the building, and because if you do, you will be interfering in the situation. This is what the sergeant says to my colleague, because my colleague is saying, I want to come inside. I'm here because my friend has called me. Let me in. The police refuse and say that he's there to carry out his duty. He proceeds upstairs. The other sergeant blocks the door, closes the door, and starts having a conversation with my colleague downstairs. While that's going on, and we're talking about the breach of the peace, I want everyone who's listening to understand, you can't see me on tape because I am behind a closed door. The door is locked. I never opened it. The next thing you hear is, and the door downstairs is vibrating, they're banging the door. They're going to break it down. This is happening in the presence of this particular sergeant. At this moment in time, I don't know where the police is. Now, if the police were really there to assist me and remain impartial, they could have gone round to either windows, the bedroom window or the lounge window, which are very close to the ground. They could have had a talk with me. They could have said, look, we're the police. Here are warrant cards. Show us your paper. And then I would have told them, I'm not here to show you my paper. I'm here to tell you that your duty is to arrest these two men who have committed the breach of the peace by using threatening language and banging on my door and breaching the peace. That's what I would have said to them, and then told them to leave and take the alleged bailiff with them.
That's right. What they did was removed your right to say to the police that they were there to keep the peace, and basically what they did was they conspired. And this is what we found in another forced eviction, and the consequences of that for the police are now being played out, as are the consequences for everyone else who was involved in that unlawful eviction.
You can clearly see, not just in my video, you can see in all videos, the police they have premeditated that they are going to act against you. Whether it's before they leave the station, whether it's while they enter onto private land, that conversion takes place. But it's not really a conversion. They know what they're going to be doing that day. That's why you can clearly see they're not remaining impartial. They're not even listening to my colleagues. They have no interest, because he then clearly says, just after he enters the building, which is now trespass, because he's only there under my authority and no one else's, that he's there to do a duty and that my colleagues will be obstructing him.
Yes, that's the interesting one. Then they bring in obstruction, but there's Rice versus Connolly. Obstruction obviously has to be with intent, and they don't seem to take that into consideration. But just in summing up for this show, because we're going to carry this on, obviously, and get this information out.
Yes.
So what you've found out is quite amazing. It will shock a lot of people, but we knew pretty much what was going on over a year ago.
Yes.
Now, at this stage of your inquiries into what's going on, you're obviously getting stonewalled, really, and patronised. So you've now gone to the borough commander. So would you come on and give us some updates when you find out a bit more or they respond again?
Absolutely. And what I would like to point out is, if a warrant is not crucial, then what are the two sergeants doing there in the first place? And if a warrant isn't crucial, the two alleged bailiffs, if they had no warrant, what authority did they have to try and break down my door in the presence of a sergeant?
Well, that's exactly right, and something that I've been looking into, and it does seem to indicate this conspiratorial interest of this network of companies. It's like a spider's web, really, once you look into it. But once you see how it operates from beginning to end. The property is stolen on the back of an incorrect assumption, which is then put through a process with private bailiff companies working with the police, and there are private investigators involved with this and surveillance companies. So this is a massive web that it's unbelievably big, actually, because once you start looking into it, you see that they've got the whole process completely sewed up, even down to the sale of the property.
Yes, and at this moment in time, what we have to do is, irrespective of, we all have an end goal, of course. We all want our properties returned. The layperson doesn't know anything. So a layperson, unfortunately, is completely lost. But if you can hold a mirror up and show them that you know what they've done is wrong, that is a starting point. After that, if I want to take out a private prosecution, whatever I choose to do, I'm just in a position now where I'm just grasping all the facts and now asking the relevant questions. And my sole question is, where is the warrant? Where is the warrant? Because they're claiming there is one, but no one can produce it, and it wasn't there on the day.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant information. So where are you now in this process? Because originally you re-entered the premises and then they changed the locks again. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been into the property 3 times, and the proof they have no warrant is, every time I've been back into my property, they have months later, by stealth, gone back into the property and changed the locks. Why would they do that? Why not take me to court? Because they didn't have a warrant, so they're not going to have any other document that continues the process. For instance, the warrant of restitution. Why haven't I been arrested? Because I was arrested like a common criminal on the day of the eviction. So I'll leave that open to people to answer, but maybe I've answered my own question. There was no warrant, so therefore, if I've re-entered my property, why haven't I been arrested by the party who has changed the details at Land Registry? I went into the property after the details were changed on Land Registry. I want to know why I'm not being arrested.
Well, it's also a question there of how that was done with the Land Registry. The Land Registry has been privatised, and that's a different matter which I'm looking into, and we have a story coming up on that.
Land Registry is part and parcel of their machinery. And anyone not listening to me talking about my case, they may be looking for a cast iron remedy. But what I would say to anyone who's listening is understand the law, understand court procedure, understand what the police can and can't do, understand what a bailiff can and can't do. We now have the Act 2015 which says that a constable cannot support a bailiff. Section 26. Please have a look at that and keep a copy with you at all times. You have to have the knowledge in order to apply it and then decide ultimately if I'm going to prosecute them, I've got all the knowledge laid out before me which will support me in that. I didn't have that. That's why when I was going to court, I had no chance of winning because I had no knowledge. The knowledge has been a work in progress.
This is very interesting, and your case is at the moment unresolved, but it looks as though you're getting higher and higher up the chain, and the highest part of that chain is now trying to cover its tracks. So we're going to follow this one with interest. We have had examples of other properties that have been returned, but they are in the minority, so people really need to be watching this, because your property was basically stolen over a very, very small lien or charge on the property, and and that was in dispute at the time of this alleged warrant.
It was in dispute, that's right. Yes, there was no debt, it was a dispute. Yes, but that leasehold property is a whole nother discussion. That's where the corruption starts. The moment you sit with a solicitor and you think you're signing a contract with another party and it's binding, that is where the corruption starts.
That's exactly right, and the property laws really need to be looked into, because what we never realise when we get involved in the so-called purchase of property, we never own it, even if we own a title of freehold. That's just a title, it's not the freehold. We'll never own the property. So that's what we have to look into, our rights within leasehold and freehold, and this the steamroller mentality that these corporations have just to steal property. It's just business. As we said earlier on, they take this process from beginning to end, from the theft of the property to the sale of the property.
We now understand how and why that's happening. And anyone out there who is maybe in this predicament where they feel maybe they're going to be evicted, or just someone who wants to learn more about this, there's lots of places to go and visit now on the internet. Be a part of the groups, learn the knowledge, understand that when you ask a question, that you understand the question you're asking. Otherwise, the answer you get back will be erroneous. It will be an opinion.
That's exactly right. Thanks very much, Nazrin, and we'll speak to you very soon on Windows on the World.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.